this series. I always love these series, but I especially am enjoying this one. There's no telling how many times in my life that I've worked through this chapter, Hebrews 11, or at least read parts of it. But to take it as a whole, which is what we're doing, it's known as the faith chapter, right? Hebrews 11 is the faith chapter because there's all these by faith statements and examples of Old Testament characters. And so I've always loved that, but there's something really has been special about this to me to work through this verse by verse. So that's what we're doing today. The word faith today, we've talked about this some. It's a really broad term, isn't it? It's come to mean that you have some kind of expression of religion in our culture today. That's how we refer, are you a person of faith? It doesn't really offend anybody to say that anymore. You can get by with that one. But I wonder, is that idea of a system of beliefs really, is that how the Bible talks about faith? And that's what we've been talking about. So the very first week, we read from the first verse of chapter 11, which the writer of Hebrews gives us kind of the definition of faith. And that is, now faith is the confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see. And what we did is we compared faith to belief to try to see, to get our arms around. I love that definition, but I'm like, I need a little more. Like, how do I understand what faith is? And what we talked about how faith is putting our beliefs in action. That belief comes first, and then faith is living that out and putting that into action. And then last week, we started in these by faith statements, and we had two characters that we looked at last week. Abel, and his brother Cain, who killed him, of course, and then Enoch. And we talked about how they lived their lives for God's approval, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, that they were striving to do what God's will was in their lives. And I love that 5-word definition of that. Enoch doesn't get a whole lot of information, but we know this about it. 5 words: he walked faithfully with God. We talked about how if that's all we got as a legacy in this world, man, I'm good with that one. How about you guys? Walk faithfully with God. And so today we're moving to our 4th by faith statement. And this one is on Noah. It's on Noah. It makes me smile, actually, talk about it. So I've been thinking all week about how familiar this is. Even in a secular conversations, I've seen, it's kind of funny when you think about the story of Noah and how violent it really is in many ways. But we even use Noah decor to decorate baby nurseries. You know, we love Noah and that story, and we utilize it. And when we talk about Noah, it may even bring some memories of childhood up to you. I was thinking, I wonder how many pieces of art that I've seen about Noah. I found a cartoon that's one of my favorites. Molly, you can put this up. I hope you guys can see it okay on the screen. I can help you if you can't. So it's Noah, and all those little things are rabbits, all that filled the ark. I just love that. And so the elephant and the giraffe looks very distressed. And so, as you know, they've been in that boat too long, those rabbits have multiplied. I love that one. So we are so used to this story, and it's beautiful art, right? And it's fun. But it's really interesting because as we get closer to Noah's part of this story, it's not immature and it's not light at all. And it's incredible example of faith, as is pointed out here. So we're going to ask the questions today. Why did the writer of Hebrews include Noah in this elite group of the faithful? There's a whole lot of Old Testament characters, but Noah made the list. Why did he do that? What were the characteristics of Noah's faith that qualified him for this list of elite faithful? And I think we'll see, as much as we enjoy the art, Its story can be quite uncomfortable for us as we look at that. So, a little bit of background before we jump into Hebrews. When we talk about it's written as a letter of Hebrews. Letters, of course, are written because of who wrote it, usually, or who received it. So the word Hebrews, the title Hebrews, gives us a clue. It's written to Jewish Christians, probably in a Roman house church in Rome, a house church in Rome, probably. Now, I say the writer of Hebrews because we don't know who wrote it. We don't know. We've got some good ideas. Probably a second-generation Christian that had a strong relationship with the apostles for sure. Barnabas is a really good guess that Barnabas may have written Hebrews. Another possibility is Apollos. Another possibility in the last 100 years that's been considered is Priscilla. I vote for Priscilla, but that's okay. There's all kinds of possibilities there, but they are influential leaders that had a strong relationship with the apostles for sure. But that's why I say the writer of Hebrews, because we don't know that for sure. But what we do know is the writer was encouraging this group of Christians who were being persecuted. They were suffering, they were hurting. And they were beginning to wonder, because of their suffering, maybe Jesus wasn't enough. And so the writer of Hebrews really pushes them, don't you give up. Don't you back down. Don't you let go that Jesus will sustain you. And so this major theme is persevering faith. And so we would all probably say that the theme of Hebrews is faith in general, but it's this persevering faith. It's this pushing through faith. He encourages them, the writer encourages them and makes a case that it's necessary for us as followers of Jesus to push through when times get hard. And then he gives them example after example after example. So he starts with God as creator, and then in chronological order goes through and picks certain characters from the Old Testament and talks about how they have characteristics of faith. Sometimes he picks characters that are a little unusual that you go, I don't know that I'd pick that, but very interesting. So we described this last week as these mini biographies, right? So we're taking our next little mini biography, and it's going to be Noah. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read the Hebrew one, and it's, when I say mini biography, it's literally one verse today in Hebrews, and then we're going to read the Genesis account. So I'm just going to read both of those together for us. So we're going to start, make sure I have start in Hebrews 11, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, and then we're going to go over to Genesis 6 and read 9 through 22. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. Now we're going to flip over to Genesis 6, verse 9. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below a roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you and be kept alive. You're to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. All right, now, I know that we could spend an entire sermon going, God destroyed humanity. I get caught there. I get it. We're not going to do that simply because we don't have time, but I love those conversations, and we're going to table that one for Bible study, okay? But let's take this to the side that Hebrews does, which is faith, is what we're talking about. So that's where we're going to concentrate today. Now, this one verse in Hebrews that we read, verse 7, it is loaded. And I want to unpack that kind of sentence by sentence. But let's table the Hebrews verse for just a second. Okay, we're going to sit it over here for a second. And let's start with the Genesis passage, okay? Because that gives us the information we need to kind of work through the Hebrews passage. So let's start there. So there is this tremendous contrast that Genesis shows us between Noah, I almost say Jonah every time, so you guys will know I'm talking about Noah, okay? Between Noah and the people of his time. That's what it says in verse 9, the people of his time. So the people of his time, the Bible describes as wicked and as violent. And actually, wickedness and violence had become the norm. And it become that's what it's the whole old saying of everybody's doing it, right? That was what life had become, is that they were defined by that. But Noah stands out, as the Bible talks, as righteous. He is quite different. There's this great contrast between the two. Now, Noah gets the same 5-word description as Enoch got, and I never noticed that before, by the way. He gets the same one. He lived, let me make sure I get it right. He walked faithfully with God. He walked faithfully with God. Same description. Very, very important for us to see that. And it's real easy to just kind of like casually read through that and go, oh, okay, it's a big deal. So that word, as we talked about last week, the word walked, what it means is a manner of living in accordance with God's commands. He lived his life for the will of God. Now, that sounds not so abnormal to us in many ways, but you have to remember that nobody else was doing that. Nobody else was doing that. He was standing alone in that. He lived his life to praise and to please God. He chose to live his life in a way that God prefers. He's made those choices. Now, you want to talk about counterculture. He's doing counterculture because everyone else is choosing violence and corruption and wickedness. And it actually had defined the human race to that point. Now, we will say things like, man, this world has just gotten out of control. It's crazy. And there's probably some truth in that. But it doesn't define all of humanity now. But the Bible tells us that all of humanity was defined that way. So Noah not only stood out among humanity in that time, he stood alone. He was it. He was the only one that was living his life to please God. Now, we will talk about from time to time within church culture how those of you that experienced church in the 50s even will say 50s and 60s, you probably missed that time a lot because that was the time the church boomed in America. And the church was respected and loved. And pastors were deeply respected in their communities. And so we will look back at that when the churches were full of people, right? And we didn't have to do anything but put a sign out front and say, y'all come. And people came into the church. And we remember those times, and we miss that. We feel the shift, and we even shudder a little bit at how Christianity can be falsely represented today, right? We know about that. And we feel isolated in our culture today. That's for sure. But we're not alone. We're not alone. And I can prove it because we're right here. All of us are together today. We're not alone. But can you imagine for just a second if you and your family were the only people in this country who desired to please God? That's it. Just your little circle. That's Noah. That's Noah. That's who he was. That's the isolation that he experienced. Now, God sees the corruption and the violence, and he chooses a sort of restart, so to speak. He chooses a different strategy with humanity. God makes this decision. He would start over with a remnant of creation. A remnant of the animal kingdom and a remnant of humanity. He made that decision. So he chooses a way to preserve humanity through one family and also creation through this remnant. His judgment falls on humanity and on the earth, but he also preserves it. He also preserves it by the way he does that. Okay, so that's the Genesis account, all right? And we know what happens there. We know that the floods come and their family is preserved. But now let's flip back over to the Hebrews account, because I want us to kind of go through this one a little bit sentence by sentence. And I'm going to read it to us again. By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. So it starts out like all the other characters. By faith, Noah. Remember the definition? By the confidence in what he hoped for and the assurance of what he had not seen. It's faith. By that, Noah, and then he does something. By putting his beliefs into action. That's our other definition of faith. Noah, when warned about things, he does something. God warns him of what is going to be. And remember, I forget about this. He's in the desert. Okay. He's in the desert. He's in dry land. He is in the middle of sand. And God is warning him of what is going to be, what is about to happen. It's outlandish. It's crazy. It's crazy that there is going to be a flood so big that everything is going to die. It's just unthinkable that would happen. So it's so familiar to us and so normal to us that we tend to miss how crazy it must have sounded when Noah heard this from God. God, you're going to what? You're going to, I mean, we won't just take the physical part of it, of floods that are going to come that big. Now, that would be crazy, but you're going to wipe out all the people and all the animals. Do you see? We hear it through those ears. It's so unusual. It's so weird. I like how Eugene Peterson takes that same verse and the way he translates. I want you to see this from the Message. Here's how he translates this verse. He says, by faith Noah built a ship in the middle of dry land. You got that one, Molly? I'll give you a second. Okay, I'll read it to you. By faith Noah built a ship in the middle of dry land. He was warned about something he couldn't see and acted on what he was told. That's pretty good. Gets it nice and clear, doesn't it? Standing in dry land, warned of what he couldn't see, And he acted on. That's how we define faith. He acted on what he was told. Now, we know that Noah is familiar with God's ways because Noah walked faithfully with God, right? He also knows God's voice. He knows God's voice. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Because if he didn't know God's voice, he would probably thought he was losing his mind, wouldn't he? Absolutely losing his mind. Not a clue. And let's just go ahead and talk about this all understanding God's voice, because if he's wrong, not only is he humiliated on monster levels, I mean, he's taken an enormous amount of time and resources to do what God has told him to do. Can you imagine the crash that's going to come if he's wrong? If he's wrong. He is hearing something from God that in most would consider absurd, and he does it. He does it. Starting to see why this guy is getting into the Hall of Fame here. He walked faithfully with God. He understood God. It reminds me of something that Jesus said. In John 10, Jesus had healed a blind man. And Pharisees are all up in arms about it. It's a whole big thing. So actually like almost over a chapter kind of in this, I think about a chapter of this story. And so the Pharisees are so upset over it, but they can't dismiss the miracle, so they're really in a hard predicament. So Jesus is responding to them, and he uses this metaphor, and he talks about a good shepherd, and he talks about their sheep, right? He starts describing that and the relationship of the two, and he says this in John 10:27. He says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." Okay? And so sheep actually are so familiar with the shepherd's voice that sometimes robbers would try to imitate the shepherd's voice. The sheep were so clued in and so well adjusted to the shepherd's voice, when they would hear someone often try to imitate it, they would scatter in fear. They knew his voice. This is what I think is what that Noah is being described as. He's so familiar with God. He has chosen to put his faith into action and walk out his beliefs in faith. He's so used to that he knows God's voice. That even when God tells him something that seems absurd, he believes it because he knows the source. He knows where it's coming from. I suspect that because he knows God, because he hears God's voice, even though he said yes to it, he didn't necessarily always want to do it. You want to bet that some days he didn't want to get up and build a boat? I feel pretty sure of that. But he chose to do that. He chooses to act on what he heard. Let's go to the next part of that. He says, in holy fear, he built an ark to save his family. Now, this tells us a lot. Well, first, we've got the holy fear part. In holy fear. Holy fear is another word for reverence. All right? He respected God. He respected God. Another way to translate that is healthy respect. That gets you there too. He respected God. It's not just the terror fear. That's not what we're talking about. Holy fear, righteous fear. God is God. I don't understand what he's saying, but he's God. Therefore, I will respond with respect and honor what God says. So that was a big part of his response. Now, Noah knows enough about God to know that God is true to his word. He was confident of that. Noah had reverence for God. He had this healthy respect. But then the second part of that, he loved his family too. I got to tell you guys something. I've never noticed that before. When I think about why Noah did what he did in faith to God's command, it's the Hebrew writers that tells us he built an ark to save his family. Interesting, isn't it? His obedience to God was a gift to his family. Oh, now, probably all know there's truth in that. I'll play one of those out for you. If I neglect my quiet time with God, my prayer time with God, may not show up as much in one day or so, but in a day or two, those two back there are going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it. Our obedience to God becomes a gift that we give our family. And it was part of the motivation for why Noah did what he did. It was part of why he did that. I think that's a huge big deal for us today. Do we think of obedience to God that way? Do we think about how our obedience to God affects the relationships of those that we do life with? Our inner circle, our family. If you're the Egglestons, you would say your tribe, right? How does it affect them? So Noah expresses love and protection over his family to respond to God in faith. I mean, here's the bottom line. If what God is saying is true, his family's going to die if he doesn't do it. How much of that was his motivation? Well, Hebrews writer says it's a great deal of it. So he builds a huge boat in the middle of the desert, and it's a selfless act. Because I guarantee you it wasn't what he wanted to spend his time on. But he does it. He does it. So the Bible doesn't tell us how long it took. The Bible tells us how big the boat is and stuff, but it doesn't tell us how long it took. Common sense tells us it took a while, right? It took years. So scholars love stuff like this. And so scholars will say, okay, based on the amount of tools they had and the resources, how long did it take? And, you know, they come up with everything between 75 years and 200 years. They don't think it could have possibly happened in less than 75 years. And you go, whew, that's a long time. But, you know, you got to remember he lives to be, 950, I think? 950 years old. So, doesn't really matter. Here's the point. This was a long-term commitment. It was a very long-term commitment. We know that he chose obedience, and because of that, he just had to keep doing it day after day after day. And I feel certain that he probably didn't want to do that every day. I mean, 75 years, that's a average. I think 78 is the average lifespan for a male American. You know, so it's like, whoo, your whole life, you're getting up and doing something that you can't see that it's going to take place. But he just kept going day after day. I doubt that he really wanted to build a boat every day. Now, I can come up with some pretty long honey-do lists. Right, Mike? I can. I really can. I designed, in my mind, some of you guys have seen it. We have a building, and the people that lived there prior to us had put this ugly juniper on the hill of it's a hill, really, a slope, to cover that up. And I needed more garden space. So I designed this 3-tiered garden beds that has stairs that goes up the middle of it. And I mean, it's great. Isn't it, Mike? It's got, he's closing his eyes right now, in case you're wondering. So it has a bed on the left and a bed on the right, and they're like 12 feet long, and stairs up the middle, and there's 3 of these. And we use that space up in the yard. I mean, it was just great. I can come up with all kinds of stuff like that for him to do. And I also came up with a fence design that instead of it taking, a weekend, it took, a month? Yes, he's doing this. All the month of in August, of course, to do. It took a great deal of time to do. And I'm certain that there was other things Mike would have rather done. Actually, he told me that there were lots of other things he would have rather done. He would have rather done other things. Why did he do it? Because of his commitment to me and his commitment to Molly. And we had promised Molly a dog when we got to the house in Concord, and we had to have a fence. So he got out there and he worked on that fence for, thank you, honey, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I was going to say a month, but we'll go with your number. 3 weeks, and he did that. Why? Because he loves us, and he was committed to us. And no, it didn't save our lives, but it was important. It was important to us. So I think on a large scale, on a very large, deep, big scale, Noah expresses his faith in God by this selfless act of obedience that was service to his family. It was service to his family. You see the humanity in Noah now? You see that? I mean, we lift this guy up, and we should, as his hero of faith. But there's such humanity in it. At the end of the day, it was also about his family. So here's the result of that we get the end of this verse of 7. It says, by his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. Okay, get this. His righteousness and obedience to God, it further revealed the world's rejection of God. It's like this comparison, right? His fact that he did what God told him to do further revealed how far out of bounds the rest of the world went. Now, we have a greater example of that than Noah, and that's Jesus. Jesus did that. Jesus' life, his righteousness, his love that had no bounds, further revealed the sinfulness of man, right? Of humanity. It made it show up. The selflessness of Jesus reveals the love of God, for sure. So the Hebrew writer makes this point that Noah's life does that too. It is a part of revealing what had happened with humanity. All right, so here's where we're going with this today. Here's our big idea for today. And Margaret helped introduce that for us really well today. Our big idea is selflessness is a requirement of a life of faith. It is. Now, don't read that as selfishness. Selflessness, self-denial, denying oneself. It's a requirement of a life of faith. Living out our beliefs, putting those into action is what faith is. We know that. Living our life in a way that's of God's will, that God approves, that God prefers, is a part of that. We've talked about that. But here's the next one. It's that we have to lay ourselves down in this. And we know how to do that some. It's a perfect message for mothers, right? I mean, mothers at our heart. And, some of us, we get it right some days and some days we don't. We know we don't do it perfectly. But the mark of motherhood is you pretty much get to stop doing what you want to do, right? And you do what's best for your family. And we all, if we have the privilege of speaking to our mothers today, we probably say that in some way to them as we say thank you, that you did what I needed. And that's what mothers do. We know how to do it. We do it in our relationships. Dads do it too, by the way. They build tiered garden beds and fences, and they fix cars, and they do all these things because they love their family. We know how to do it. We practice it with each other, and it's a requirement of our faith. Because at some point in time, God speaks to us, and it sounds outlandish. Here's one. I need you to pray for the very enemy that's trying to take your country out. That's outlandish, God. No, I need you to do that. I need you to pray for that politician that you voted against, that you would rather somebody else take out. I want you to pray for them. I can't be hearing that, God. Got to be wrong. I want you to give money to someone you don't know. Surely that's not right. See, at some point, God speaks to us and asks us to do something that's going to require us to deny ourselves. He's going to ask that of us, something that is incredibly uncomfortable at some point. Faith is living out our beliefs, and it often requires giving of ourselves. There's no doubt about that. It also requires denying ourselves. Jesus talked about this, and he didn't candy coat it. Jesus didn't make it tie it up with a pretty bow and go, oh, this is going to look great like some of us preachers do today. He didn't do that at all. Here's how Jesus says it. Jesus says, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me will find it. It's not candy coated. It's a mark of the follower of Jesus, is that we set aside what we prefer and we choose what God prefers. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be scary. And it can be a gift. And that's what God calls us to. The Hebrew writers reminds these Jewish Christians that are struggling, they're suffering. He reminds them, don't you dare give up. Don't you dare think that Jesus isn't enough. He is. And when you do what God prefers, you'll be blessed for it. He told them that. It was true for them then. It was true for Noah later, and it will even be true for us today. So here's our questions for this today. Will we stand tall in obedience even when it costs us? Will we stand tall in obedience even when it costs us? Will our church? Will we remain faithful to what God calls us to do? Here's another one. Do we recognize God's voice in our life? They're like, Marty, what if I don't? You just move in that direction, and ultimately God guides us. It's the striving to hear and the desire to be obedient that gets us down the right path. God will guide us. Do we recognize God's voice? Do we respond? And will we respond in faithfulness to God's nudging and urging and calling? Will we do, to the best of our ability, what God prefers? And I can't leave this one out today, of all days. Will we serve our family through obedience to God? Will we recognize that as we are obedient to God, it is an act of love to our families? May we live out what we profess. May we put in action what we say we believe. And may we be commended for our faithfulness. Amen. Let's pray.